So this morning we discussed as the first instruction the meditation or the reflection on impermanence, and so this reflection on impermanence is supposed to make ourselves more realistic about life, and like as we said yesterday, we have this precious human life. There are lots of things that we have to be very happy about, that we need to appreciate, that we need to value. But then there's no certainty, there's no permanence. So therefore, we cannot take it for granted. We have to use this opportunity now, today, and make this life useful, meaningful, and something that will be of great use for myself and for others as well. And then now the next is even if it is everything is impermanent, then so what? I'll die and be born again, no problem. This is a little bit sometimes those people who have the belief of rebirth becomes lazy. I've seen this. Those who do not believe in rebirth are much more, what can you say, much more in a hurry, much more in a hurry, much more impatient, much more have to do things and achieve things and get things done very quickly. And those who believe in life after life seem to say, okay, if it doesn't happen this life, no problem, next life. I got this, there is this tendency. I found this in myself also. Once, I didn't realize, I didn't think it was like that, but once, I think around the first time I came to the West, I think, there was a journalist who was interviewing me, and then we were talking about lots of things, and then, something he was saying, something like, I don't know, would you be returning to Tibet, or something. And I said, well, I don't know, but if not, so what? Maybe next life, maybe life after, something like that. And he was very shocked. I said, So I realized that, this kind of thing is there. But anyway, that's not the idea. The thing is that we will be born again and again and again. So no problem, but there is a problem. Because, we are in the samsaric state of mind. And the samsaric state of mind is not free from sufferings. There are lots of problems. Now, we need to understand this samsara. Samsara is not a place. Samsara is a state of mind. Samsara, if samsara is the place or this world, then the Buddha would not have been beyond samsara, because he was also in this world. But samsara is not about the world, not the place. Samsara is a state of mind. The state of mind where we have always fear, either the fear of pain and problems, or fear of change, or fear of insecurity, and we are kind of constantly under these fears, and thereby do not have complete satisfaction, complete happiness, complete freedom, and thereby always having to run after something that you don't have, or run away from something that you don't want. And so therefore there is always a certain kind of stress, a certain kind of anguish, a certain kind of dissatisfaction, a certain kind of fear. If our mind is like that, then we are in the samsaric state. So therefore, that samsaric state of mind is not free from suffering. It doesn't mean to say that always having pain is not like that. And there are lots of times we have nice time. We can have a picnic like we had on on Friday, and have a big piece of tiramisu and have a really nice time. But that doesn't mean that we have no problem at all. And so therefore, as long as we are in the samsaric state of mind, there's always the potential suffering, there's always the potential negative emotions of anger, hatred, greed, ignorance, jealousy, arrogance, and they kind of overtake us. And then, if those emotions kind of overpower us, then we create pain and trouble for ourselves, as well as pain and trouble for others. So that's the samsara. And so therefore, we need to, all of us, we need to find a way to free ourselves from that state of mind. Because if we are within that state of mind all the time, then we cannot be totally free from suffering. So therefore we need to also to understand this. Is very, very important, I think, to understand the samsaric state of mind and accept it, that I am a samsaric being, and all these people around me are also samsaric beings. I think it's very, very important to understand. The first, it is a little bit annoying, it's a little bit sad, it's a little bit kind of, frustrating that everybody around me, everybody, including myself, I have all kind of negative emotions. I can be sad, I can be unhappy, I can be hurt, I can be, jealous and proud and, greedy and selfish and all these things. They should not be. And it's not good that everybody is not completely compassionate and kind and, helping each other all the time. But then, when you deeply understand this and deeply accept this, that the people are like that, and that's not good. They are not like that because of they want to be like that, but they are like that because they cannot help. Then that frustration, I think, can turn into what we call compassion. That if people are selfish, if people are, not so positive, not so kind, so that doesn't necessarily, kind of provoke anger and frustration in me, but more compassion and understanding. So therefore, the more I understand the samsara, the more I can have less expectation from the people around me. And the more I can have less expectation from the people and situations around me, the more I can appreciate their positive actions and positive, even somebody is a little bit kind, I can appreciate it much more. Otherwise, sometimes we expect too much and then we don't appreciate. Like, okay, you first.
Zdaj se vrnemo k knjigi, potem ko smo končali z pogledom zatočišča. In zjutraj smo govorili o tem, o prvem navodilu ali prvi stvari, prvi točki, in sicer razmišljanje in meditacija o nestalnosti. In to razmišljanje ali ta meditacija je namenjena temu, da bolje razumemo ali postanem bolj realistični glede življenja. In ko smo včeraj govorili o dragocenem človeškem življenju, potem vemo, da je veliko stvari, zaradi katerih smo lahko srečni, veliko stvari, ki jih lahko cenimo, za katere vemo, da so zelo dragocene. Vendar nestalnost pomeni tudi, da te stvari niso gotove, ni gotovo, da bojo jutri še tukaj. Nobene stvari ne moramo vzeti kot samo po sebi umevno. In to pomeni, da moramo izkoristiti današnji dan, moramo izkoristiti vse priložnosti, ki se nam ponujajo danes, da bi naše življenje naredili smiselno in bili v korist sebi, da bi bilo naše življenje v dobrobit nam sami in pa tudi vsem drugim. In zdaj, ena stvar je, če vidimo vse kot nestalno, potem pač si lahko mislimo, da človek umre, se spet rodi, pa spet umre in se spet rodi, in da pravzaprav kaj pa je tukaj problem. In Rinpoče pravi, da velikokrat ljudje, ki verjamejo v reinkarnacijo, verjamejo v ponovno rojstvo, se mu zdi, da postanejo malce leni. Da tisti ljudje, ki ne verjamejo v ponovno rojstvo, ki mislijo, da imamo na voljo samo to eno življenje, se veliko bolj podvizajo okoli stvari v tem življenju in so veliko bolj nestrpni oziroma hočejo dokončati, početi stvari, doseči stvari v tem življenju. In zaradi tega, ker če razmišljaš, da bo še naslednje življenje, v katerem lahko postoriš stvari, potem si rečeš v redu, nisem v tem življenju, bom pa naslednjem. Ne? In prav, Rinpoče je rekel, da je celo pri sebi samem je opazil to tendenco in tega niti ni vedel, ni prepoznal. Dokler ni enkrat prvič, ko je prišel na Zahod, se je pogovarjal z nekim novinarjem, ki je delal intervju z njim in se pogovarjal o mnogih rečeh in potem ga je ta novinar spraševal o tem, kakšno je načrteno za prihodnost in če se namerava vrniti na Tibet. Ne? In Rinpoče tako razmišljal, pa tisto tretje, mogoče v naslednjem življenju. Ne. In ta novinar je bil popolnoma šokiran zaradi tega odgovora in potem je tudi Rinpoče ugotovil, da ima to tendenco v sebi, da misli, da se lahko stvari zgodijo v naslednjem življenju, če pač ne v tem, da se jih da prelagati. In pač potem lahko razmišljamo, da se ponavljajo ta življenje in lahko večno prelagamo stvari. Zdaj, kaj je problem s takim načinom razmišljanja? Problem je v tem, da dokler ostajamo v tem krogu, je naš še zmeraj v samsaričnem stanju. In samsarično stanje uma ni osvobojeno trpljenja. V samsaričnem stanju uma se pojavlja mnogo problemov. Zato je treba razumeti, kaj sploh samsara je. To ni kraj, to ni lokacija. Samsara je način, kako je naš je stanje našega uma. Kajti, če bi bila samsara nek kraj, ali če bi rekla, da je ta svet samsara, potem pravzaprav tudi Buda ne bi bil onkraj samsare, ker Buda je bil tukaj, se je pojavil tukaj in učil. In v samsaričnem stanju uma se zmeraj pojavlja strah. V samsaričnem stanju uma nas je zmeraj strah bolečine, problemov, spremembe, strah nas je negotovosti, ti strahovi nas neprestano trpinčijo. Nikoli ne moramo doseči popolne sreče, popolnega zadovoljstva, popolne svobode. Zmeraj obstajajo stvari, za katerimi hlepimo, katerim tečemo, oziroma stvari, od katerih bežimo stran, ker so stvari, ki jih nočemo v svojem življenju. To pomeni, da smo venomer pod stresom, venomer v stanju neke tesnobe, nezadovoljstva, strahu. In to je tisto, kar imenujemo samsarično stanje uma. Se pravi, stanje, kjer nismo osvobojeni, nismo svobodni, nismo osvobojeni trpljenja. Seveda to ne pomeni, da je bolečina in trpljenje, da so neprestano prisotne. Včasih se zgodijo tudi lepe stvari, včasih se imamo fajn, koliko smo se imeli recimo v četrtek na pikniku z Rinpočem in pravi Rinpoče potem je pojedel en velik kos tiramisuja in se je imel zelo lepo. Se pravi, ni tako, da bi bila ves čas prisotna bolečina in trpljenje, ampak to stanje seveda ni brez neproblematično. Zakaj? Zaradi tega, ker vedno obstaja potencial, da bo vzniknilo trpljenje, da bojo vzniknila negativna čustva, jeza, sovraštvo, pohlep, aroganca, zavist. In ko nas preplavijo taka čustva, ko nas premagajo, ustvari tako stanje uma, oziroma mi ustvarimo zaradi takega stanja uma veliko problemov zase in za druge. Ustvarjamo bolečino in neprijetnosti, sebi povzročamo bolečine in drugim povzročamo bolečine. In to je tisto, kar imenujemo samsara. Torej, mi vsi moramo najti pot, način, kako se osvoboditi ali spremeniti to samsarično stanje uma. Ker dokler nam to ne uspe, ne bomo nikoli popolnoma osvobojeni trpljenja. In to je zelo pomembno razumeti. Pomembno je razumeti, kaj to samsarično stanje uma je. In sprejeti dejstvo, da se nahajamo trenutno v takem stanju. In sprejeti dejstvo, da sem samsarično bitje. In da so vsi okoli mene, vsi ljudje okoli mene v tem trenutku so samsarična bitja. In na začetku je to spoznanje lahko, nam gre lahko na živce, lahko nas spravi v žalost, lahko smo frustrirani zaradi te ugotovitve. Kajti vsi okoli mene, vključno z mano, smo v tem stanju uma. In vsi smo v tem nerazumevanju, vsi smo v stanjih, ki so žalostna, nesrečna. V nas se pojavljajo prizadetost, bolečina, pohlep, sebičnost. In ne samo jaz, ampak vsi okoli mene so taki. Namesto želim si, da bi bili ljudje okoli mene sočutni, prijazni, ljubeči, ampak dejansko niso. In to je treba zelo, zelo globoko razumeti. In treba tudi razumeti, da ljudje niso taki zaradi tega, ker bi si želeli biti taki, ampak ravno tako kot mene samega, tudi njih preplavijo ta negativna čustva, ker so v samsaričnem stanju uma, ker so samsarična bitja. In ko to globoko dojamem, potem se frustracija, ki jo doživljam zaradi sebe in zaradi drugih ljudi, lahko spremeni v sočutje. Ko vidim, da so ljudje sebični, da ne delujejo pozitivno, da njihov stanje uma ni pozitivno, da niso ljubeči in prijazni, to v meni ne povzroči več jeze, ampak namesto tega se v meni vzbudi sočutje in razumevanje. In bolj ko razumem samsaro, kako samsara je, manj pričakovanj imam do ljudi okoli sebe, do svoje okolice. In manj ko imam teh pričakovanj, bolj lahko cenim pozitivne stvari, ki se zgodijo. Kadar razumem, kakšna samsara je, takrat lahko vsako najmanjše pozitivno dejanje strani drugih ga lahko cenim, ga lahko prepoznam kot tako in cenim. Če pa pričakujem preveč, potem pa ne bom znal ceniti nobenega pozitivnega dejanja strani drugih.
And from Buddhist point of view, the main characteristic of samsara is negative emotions. The stronger the negative emotions, the more kind of worse kind of samsaric state of being. So therefore they say the causes of samsara is klesha and karma. Klesha is the negative emotions. Anger and hatred, that's the worst, strongest, negative. Then like too much greed, too much kind of miserliness, too much attachment and clinging, that kind of emotion. Second, then too much kind of ignorance, dullness, completely kind of not understanding what is what and not knowing and having the ability to distinguish from the right from the wrong, that ignorance. Then too much desire, too much want, too much kind of the state of poverty, the mentality of poverty and busyness all the time. The human realm, from Buddhist point of view, is described as that. They say that me tel ponki dunga. Tel means busy. Very, very busy all the time, but not enough. Busy, but not, pong is like poverty, not enough. So human beings, a little bit described like that. Very busy, trying to get something all the time, but never have enough. And then jealousy, too much jealousy or envy. Then arrogance and pride. Because of these six, dominantly, these six different emotions, they talk about 6 realms. And also, the stronger the negativity, the more lower the hell realm, the lighter the heavenly realm. From Buddhist point of view, heaven is also regarded as samsaric realm. Of course, hell and heaven can be described in many different ways. One way of describing them is, the hell is somewhere you have an Italian driver. You know that? Italian driver, English cook, German policeman, Swiss lover, and French organizer. That's hell. And heaven is... Huh? I don't know, the civil Slovenians, what are they good for? And then the heaven, according to that, is, I think, Italian lover, Swiss organizer, German driver, English policeman, and French cook. Yeah, I think so. Something like that. That's one way of describing hell and heaven. There's another way of describing hell and heaven. Is this story, one big hole. You know this story? That somebody died, and then he went to the God, and then God said, well, you can see hell and heaven and everywhere you want to go. So he said, yes, that's very nice. Then he said, where you want to go first? He says, I want to go and see the hell. So I asked him, show him hell and heaven. So he was taken to a room, big room, all whitewashed. And then inside there was a big long table with very nice white tablecloth, and on that all kind of nice food displayed. And then both sides people are sitting and they are trying to eat, but they are very unable to eat, and they are very, very not happy, they are very anguished. And then he said, why they are so unhappy and anguished? And he sees that everyone has a long chopstick, a big long chopstick, and they try to eat and cannot eat because this chopstick is too long and too big. So it's a hell. Now he says, okay, now I want to see the heaven. So he's taken to the next room above it, and he goes in and sees exactly the same. There, the same table, same tablecloth, same food, same long chopstick, but they are very happy. They are very happy and very, satisfied. And they say, why they are so satisfied while the others, down there is so unhappy. And he finds that these people are feeding each other. This long chopstick is very bad to eat for yourself, but very good to feed across the table. So the hell and the heaven is about that. People who are only wanting something for yourself, and they have. And those who can, give each other is heaven. I think there is lots of truth in that. When we talk about the hell and heaven, it's about how you are. We talk about how you are. I think it is very easy to create hell for ourselves. It's very easy to create heaven also for ourselves if we want to. So therefore, if you only, indulge in anger and hatred and, greed and too much kind of, too much selfishness, too much, then we create hell for ourselves. It's very easy. And instead of that, if you kind of let go of these negative emotions, be more kind, be more compassionate, be more patient, be more tolerant, then you also can create heaven for yourselves. That's why I think there's lots of teachings on, if you do positive things, you have heaven. If you do negative things, you can create hell for you. Like one Tibetan old lady once went to the Lama, and she said, I've been listening to your teachings quite a lot, but I'm confused now. Because if I listen what you say about how negative the negative deed is, how easily you can go to hell by doing something negative, then, let me alone, and I'm just an ordinary native. But even you, Lama, I think you're going to hell. And if I listen to you, how good, how positive the positive actions are, and how strong the positive actions, positive result is, then let alone you, Lama, you are, but even me, this old lady is going to heaven. So what is it? So I think it is not about, like this hell kind of punishing down and, heaven, you're kind of rewarded and things like that, but, it's based on our actions, on our emotions, and how we want to be, how I want to be is how I want to do. If I want to be more freer, more happier, more joyful, more, want to be freer from the problems and sufferings, I need to make myself, I need to develop myself more positively, less angry, less hateful, more forgiving, more kind and compassionate. The more I do that, the more positive I become. And then the more the negative emotions I kind of cultivate. And then actions. The karma is nothing but actions that's driven by negative emotions. Then I become worse for myself. I'm harming myself and harming others as well. So this is very important, because this understanding tells us very clearly what is it about, what is Dharma practice about. What is that we have to practice? Actually, there is nothing to practice but on our emotions. The main target of our practice, Dharma practice, is our emotions. To change, to transform our negative emotions and to develop more positive emotions. The more we can do that, the more we are kind of better off, the more transformed we become. And this is also, the samsara and nirvana is this. The difference is, if you are totally overpowered by negative emotions and negative actions, then we are in samsara. If we are freer, we are more higher realms of the positive realms of the samsara, and if we are totally free from them, then we have nirvana. So by this I think then we come to understand what is the focus of our practice, Dharma practice, because it's extremely important. We need to know very clearly what is practice. Sometimes people ask me, what do I practice? Should I practice shamatha meditation? Should I practice Tara? Should I practice Shailajin? Should I practice Jyu? Should I practice Merlo? I said, doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter, but actually you have to practice yours. You are your practice. I am my practice. My emotions, my reactions, my habitual tendencies, that's my practice. There was this very old story about Dharma practice. Atis Dipankara, Atis Dipankara, the great Indian master who came to Tibet to reform Buddhism, or revive Buddhism. And he had a very, I think you know this story, he had a very diligent student. And this diligent student was doing this, circumambulation of the monastery every day, from early morning to the late night. And then one day, the teacher came down and said, "It's very nice, it's very good that you do so much this, circumambulation of the monastery, but isn't it better that you do some Dharma practice?" And he said, "Okay, this is not Dharma practice. So what is Dharma practice? It must be reading the scriptures." Then he went into the monastery, he took down the scriptures and he was reading from early morning to late evening in the state. Again, after some days, this teacher came down and said, "Oh, it's very good that we are doing so much reading scriptures, but isn't it better that you did some Dharma practice?" And then he thought, what is Dharma practice now? Must be meditation. So he was sitting meditation from early morning to late evening, every day. And again, after a few days, he came down and said, "Why, it's really nice that you do so much meditation, but isn't it better that you do some Dharma practice?" Then he got really frustrated. What is Dharma practice then? So Dharma practice, these things could be Dharma practice, but could not be Dharma practice. Because Dharma practice is about, working on your own self, on your emotions, on your reactions, on your habitual tendencies. If we do that, then it's Dharma practice. If we don't do that, we don't do Dharma practice. Even if we are in retreat, even if we are in the monastery, even if you put on double layer of robes, 9 times 9 robes, doesn't make any difference. Yeah. So therefore, that's why sometimes I say, I really think the Dharma practice is not about time. People sometimes say, "I have no time to practice Dharma." I say, it's not about time. Because we don't need any special time to get angry, or upset, or hurt. I cannot say that I have no time to get angry, or I have no time to get hurt. Then it's very nice. Then we're very busy. That's the end of the problem. So it's not about time. It's about understanding and discipline. So therefore, so to understand the real, what is the practice about? What is it to practice? It's, I think, extremely important. He's such a great translator. I don't have to worry at all.
Glavna karakteristika samsare so negativna čustva in močnejše, ko so ta negativna čustva, V slabšem stanju se bomo znašli v budističnem diskurzu se reče, da je samsara posledica kleš in karme. Kleše so negativna stanja uma oziroma negativna čustva. In to je vzrok samsare, negativna čustva in karma. Najhujše negativno čustvo je jeza oziroma sovraštvo. Potem naslednje negativno čustvo je pohlep ali navezanost ali stiskaštvo. Potem imamo naslednje negativno čustvo, ki je nevednost, topost, nezmožnost razlikovanja, kaj je kaj, nezmožnost uvideti, kaj je prav in kaj je narobe. Potem imamo negativna čustva poželenja, mentaliteto revščine, mentaliteto, ki je kar naprej zaposlena z nečim. In rečeno je, da v človeškem območju I didn't get that. In human realm there is this main characteristics, it's the
tail pong.
What's that?
Tail means busy.
Busy.
Very busy all the time.
Is that a Tibetan word?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tibetan word tail means busy. Pong means kind of not having enough.
Aha. Ok, ja. Se pravi, tibetanska beseda telpon opisuje zelo dobro stanje, v katerem se nahajamo ljudje. In sicer, da tel pomeni, da smo kar naprej zaposleni in pon pomeni, da nikoli nimamo dovolj. Zmeri nekaj premalo. Kar naprej nekaj okoli laufamo in nikoli nimamo dovolj. Nikoli nismo zadovoljni. Potem, se pravi, ta čustva naprej so še zavist oziroma in potem aroganca in ponos. Skratka, tukaj gre za 6 negativnih čustev, negativnih stanj uma, ki definirajo bivanje v 6 območjih samsare. In močnejša, ko so ta negativna čustva, niže smo, v slabšem stanju smo in manj močna, kot so ta čustva više, gor smo, se pravi, nekje v božanskih območjih, ki pa so po budističnem razumevanju tudi del samsare, so še zmeraj samsarično način bivanja. In zdaj lahko bi na različne načine opisovali ta dva pola bivanja v samsari, v nebesa in peku. In recimo en od opisov pravim, če je manjši bil opis, je, da peko bi bil to, če bi imeli italijanskega voznika, angleškega kuharja, nemškega policaja, švicarskega ljubimca, pa francoskega organizatorja, menedžerja stvari. In kaj bi bil pa potem v tem opisu, kaj bi bila nebesa, bi bilo, če bi imeli italijanskega ljubimca, angleškega policaja, nemškega voznika, švicarskega organizatorja in francoskega kuharja. Tako. Hvala. In to je en način, recimo, kako bi lahko opisovali, kaj je to, kaj bi bila lahko nebesa in peko. Ali pa še ena poučna zgodbica je o tem, en človek enkrat umrl in je prišel k Bogu in mu je rekel, Bog, ja, lahko se ogledaš vse naokoli, boš videl, kako izgledajo peko ali pa kako izgledajo nebesa. In je se možakar odločil, da bi šel najprej pogledati v peko in so ga odpeljali v eno sobo, ki je bila vsa v belem in tam v tej sobi je bila ena velika miza, pogrnjena z belim prtom in na tej mizi so bile razstavljene vse mogoče slastne jedi. In za to mizo so sedeli ljudje in izgledali so izjemno nesrečni, popolnoma zafrustrirani. In zakaj so bili nesrečni? Zaradi tega, ker je bila na mizi vsa ta hrana, oni so bili palačni, ker za to hrano so imeli edini način, kako bi jo lahko jedli z dolgimi kitajskimi palčkami. Toliko dolgimi, da si niso mogli sami dati hrane v usta. In potem mi so rekli, dobro, zdaj te pa odpeljamo še v nebesa in nebesa so pa spet ena soba in nadstropje više in ta soba je bila identična, ravno tako bela soba z ogromno belo mizo, z belim prtom in na njej razgrnjena vsakovrstna okusna hrana, ampak ljudje so izgledali izjemno zadovoljni. Ne? In potem se je vprašal, zakaj so ljudje v tej sobi srečni, če vse je enako. Ne? In potem je bila skrivnost je bila v tem, da so ti ljudje v tej naslednji sobi so hranili drug druge z temi dolgimi palčkami. Prav so pomagali drug drugemu in so se lahko nahranili. Ker te dolge palčke so izjemno dobre zato, da lahko pomagaš jesti unmu, ki sedi nasproti tebe. In to ponazarja to, da kadar hočemo, želimo, zahtevamo stvari samo sami za sebe, je to peklo. In kadar si želimo dobro in hočemo stvari za druge, so to nebesa. In v bistvu gre za to, kako smo mi, kako smo. To je tisto, kar ustvarja peklo ali pa nebesa. V resnici je zase lahko, če tako želimo, z lahkoto ustvarimo peklo ali pa nebesa. Če se prepuščamo jezi, pohlepu, ekstremni sebičnosti, potem je zelo lahko ustvariti peklo, izkušnjo pekla za nas same. In če uspemo opustiti negativnosti, če uspemo postati bolj ljubeči, prijazni, sočutni, tolerantni, potem ustvarjamo zase nebesa. In veliko učenj v budizmu govori točno o tem, da če delamo pozitivne stvari, če razmišljamo pozitivno, potem bomo ustvarili nebesa in kadar počnemo negativne stvari, potem se bo za nas ustvaril peklo. In ena zgodba ponazarja to, neka stara gospa je dolgo časa poslušala nekega učitelja in potem je enkrat prišla do njega in mu rekla, meni zdaj tukaj nekaj ni jasno, ne? Ko poslušam tvoje učenje, ne? Ko razlagaš o vseh negativnih stanjih uma, o vseh negativnih emocijah in kakšne posledice to prinaša, potem se mi zdi, da seveda, kar se mene tiče, tako skok ni vprašanje, ker sem navadno sam sabrično bitje, bom šla zagotovo v peklo, ne? Ampak celo za tebe nisem prepričana, da ne boš tudi ti šel v peklo. Potem po drugi strani, ko sem te pa poslušala, ko si razlagal o pozitivnih stvarih, o tem, kako močna so te dejanja in kako pozitivne posledice lahko prinesejo, pa razmišljam, da ti boš šel seveda v nebesa, pa še celo jaz, ki sem popolnoma navaden človek, bom šla v nebesa. In kako je to mogoče? Dobro je razumeti, da peklo ni neke vrste kazen in nebesa niso neke vrste nagrade. Ampak da glede na to, kakšne so naše čustva, to potem vodi naše dejanja in to ustvarja posledice. In kakšen si želim biti, kam se želim usmeriti v svojem življenju, je odvisno, se pravi, to je odvisno od tega, kaj počnem, oziroma kar počnem bo imelo za neke posledice za moje življenje. In lahko se usmerim v to, da sem bolj srečen, bolj svoboden, bolj radosten, da se osvobodim trpljenja in v tem primeru, če si želim je v to smer, se bom razvijal v to smer in bom opuščal negativnosti, zmeraj bolj opuščal negativnosti in zmeraj bolj gojil pozitivno stanje. Karma so dejanja, ki jih vodijo negativna čustva. In ta dejanja vodijo to, da povzročam škodo sebi in drugim. prizadenem sebe in druge. In razumevanje tega je v resnici resnična praksa darme. Razumevanje, da s svojimi dejanji lahko bodi se škodim sebi in drugim ali pa si koristim. In v resnici ni druge stvari, na kateri bi bilo potrebno delati kot naša čustva. To je glavni cilj prakse, transformirati svoja čustva, da preobrazimo negativna čustva in da razvijamo pozitivno stanje uma. In bolj, ko nam to uspeva, boljše je za nas, bolj se lahko spremenimo. In enako lahko rečemo za samsaro in nirvano. Ravno tako, kadar me premagajo, preplavijo negativna čustva in povzročijo, da počnem negativna dejanja, potem v bistvu se ima to za posledico samsarična stanja uma. In bolj, kot se lahko tega osvobodim, više lahko grem v višja, ne tako neprijetna stanja samsarja. In kadar se lahko popolnoma osvobodim vseh negativnih čustev in preneham z negativnimi dejanji, potem je to nirvana. Se pravi, kaj je pravzaprav, kaj je fokus, kaj je tisto najpomembnejše v praksi, na kar se moramo osredotočiti. In to je izjemno pomembna stvar. Rinpoče pravi, včasih ga ljudje sprašujejo, pa kaj ne delam, kjero prakso točno, ne? A ne delam šamato, ne delam prakso tare, ne delam četa, ne delam nondrol. Rinpoče zmeri pravi, ni pomembno, ker ti si tvoja praksa. Spremeniti sebe, to je tisto, kar moraš narediti, spremeniti svoje negativna čustva, odpraviti svoje negativne navade. Potem je Rinpoče še povedano zgodbo o Atiša Dipankara, je bil veliki indijski mojster, ki je prišel na Tibet, da bi spet pomagal oživiti budizem. In Atiša je imel enega študenta in učenca, ki je bil sicer zelo priden in je vsak dan delal, temu se reče kora, neke vrste praksa, predanosti in hodil okoli samostane. In čez nekaj časa je Tiša prišel do njega in rekel, da je zelo dobro, zelo pozitivno to, kar počneš, zelo lepo, ampak a ne bi bilo boljše, če bi prakticiral dharmo, če bi sledil Budovi poti. In potem je on razmišljal in je rekel, mogoče bi moral poštudirati budistične tekste, da je to praksa dharme. In je šel v knjižnico in je cele dneve od jutra do večera bral in razmišljal in študiral teksti. In spet se ponovil to, da čez nekaj časa je prišel Atiša in mu rekel, to je zelo dobro, kar počneš, ampak a ne bi bilo boljše, če bi prakticiral dharmo, da bi sledil Budovu nauku. In je začel spet razmišljati in je rekel, mogoče bi moral pa meditirati. In potem se je lotil tega in je cele dneve meditiral in meditiral. In potem je prišel Atiša spet in ga spet vprašal. To je zelo, zelo fajn, da meditiraš, ampak ne bi bilo boljše, če bi prakticiral dharmo. In potem je bil ta študent čisti sebe, ker ni vedel, kaj misli s tem. In zdaj vse te stvari, ki jih je počel, so lahko dharma praksa, so lahko trening, so lahko Budova pot ali pa tudi ne. In odvisno je pa samo od tega, ali s temi praksami delamo na svojih čustvih, delamo na svojih negativnih emocijah, delamo na svojih negativnih vzorcih navadah. In če je, potem je karkoli dharma praksa. Če pa tega ne počnemo, se pravi, če ne spreminjamo sami sebe, potem pa tudi, če gremo v retreat, v meditativno osamo, in tudi, če pravi Rinpoče, če si na meniška oblačila naložim še ena meniška oblačila, pa še 9-krat to ponovim, to ni dharma praksa. In Rinpoče še pravi, ne gre tukaj za to, da bi rabo čas za to. To ni vprašanje časa. Tako kot ne potrebujem časa, da se razjezim, to bi bilo nesmiselno, če bi rekel, nimam časa, da se razjezim. To bi bilo v resnici zelo lahko, ker potem, če bi bil dovolj zaposlen, se sploh ne bi mogel razjeziti, ker ne bi imel časa. Ampak ni na ta način. Zato, da bi prakticirali dharmo, rabimo razumevanje in disciplino. In to je bistvo budistične prakse in to je zelo pomembno razumeti.
So I think that's all. So, any questions?
Vprašanje. Zdaj smo zaključili s testom.
Jaz bi vprašal, kako je se znamo, budizem, vse trpljenje, kot te zaletiš življenje, posledice tvojih dejanj, ki si jih naredil, kako je se znamo budizem, pa vsak nobenih ne dolžil, vsi od unih, ki trpijo, nobenih ne dolžil, pa si to zaslužila, pa če to razumem. To se bo vprašal.
Aha, okay. So, the question is, it seems that in Buddhism, if I understand correctly, that any suffering is effect of my former negative deeds. And by this logic, there's no one who is innocent. There's no one who doesn't deserve to suffer. That's the exact word you deserve.
This question is coming from the understanding that it is a punishment. The suffering is a punishment. I think from Buddhist point of view, the concept of punishment is not there. It is the consequences. So we suffer because of our own way of reacting and understanding and habitual tendency and things like that. So therefore, there is no question of deserving or not deserving. It's a question of how I want it to be. If I want to free myself from suffering, I can do it. I have to know how to do it, I have to work on it, and I can do it. It's up to me. From Buddhist point of view, it's up to me. It's not up to anybody else. Or it's not about, even past. Of course, we have the effect of the past. But effect of past is not something we cannot change. We can change. Because we can change now. And so therefore we can change the past. Past is not something that always remains with us. So therefore, I think from Buddhist point of view, that's why the practice of Dharma is important. If I see that these sufferings or problems that I have, if I want to change that situation, then I can do something, I can work on it, I can change myself, and thereby how I perceive, how I react, how I experience, and if I transform that, I can be totally free from suffering. Everybody and anybody can be totally free from all the sufferings. That's the main understanding from Buddhist point of
view. V budizmu ne obstaja ideja kazni. Trpljenje ni kazen za nekaj. Je samo posledica določenih stvari. In trpljenje nastane zaradi našega načina, kako reagiramo na stvari, kako razumemo stvari, zaradi naših navad. In ni vprašanje tega, ali kdo zasluži trpljenje ali ne, ampak kaj hočem storiti, kako hočem živeti, ali se hočem osvoboditi trpljenja in če se želimo osvoboditi trpljenja, če je to moja odločitev, potem moram vedeti, kako se tega lotiti, delati na tem in potem je popolnoma na meni, da mi to lahko uspe. Sprav, ne gre za to, da bi bila moja osvoboditev trpljenja odvisna od kogarkoli drugega, niti od mojih preteklih dejanj, ne. Kajti celo, seveda to, kar doživljamo, je posledica naših prejšnjih dejanj, ampak tudi to lahko spremenimo, ker lahko spremenimo ta sedanji trenutek, oziroma kako ga doživljamo. In na ta način se tudi naša zaznava preteklosti spremeni. Preteklost ni nekaj, kar bi zmeraj viselo na nas. In se pravi, če uvidimo, da obstaja trpljenje, in to je glavna poanta budistične prakse, potem se lahko odločimo in hočemo spremeniti to situacijo. In potem lahko delamo na tem, spremenimo sebe, spremenimo način, kako doživljamo stvari, spremenimo način, kako reagiramo na stvari, kako doživljamo stvari, se preobrazimo in na ta način se lahko popolnoma osvobodimo trpljenja. In vsi, prav vsak se lahko ima možnost in je zmožen popolnoma se osvoboditi trpljenja.
I have a son who is 14 years old, and he can get very, very, very angry. And it's almost as if somebody would touch something in him and just goes off. And I was wondering how to help.
That's a disease called what do you call it? Adolescence. What do you call it? Teenage. No.
Yeah, but he was
Teenage.
He was like that before. He was like that before, since about 7.
He has?
He has been like that from about 6 or 7 years old.
Okay. Yeah. But generally, I don't know what happens. I don't think I was like that. These days, the teenage people become so difficult. Maybe it was like that all the time. You were like that?
I have some anger too. I'm better now, but...
My worst time was around between 5, 6 to 10, 11 was my worst time. And I was really very angry and fighting with everybody. I used to see red and blue. And I used to fight with boys much taller than me. But I had a system. I would go a little bit far and then run at my fastest speed with my head like this, aiming at the stomach. And then he would fall down. And once he falls down, then I can hit with my fist and with my legs and with my knees. And if it doesn't seem to help, then I would bite. And I got some beatings also. That was very good. And then around, I think, 11, 12, then I studied Buddhism. I studied this Bodhicaya Avatara, and there was one thing which really helped me. There is a whole chapter on patience. And my teacher was great. He was a very, very great teacher. And then I understood something. And one thing that was very helpful was, if you cannot change it, there's no use to be angry. If you can change it, there's no need to be angry. That you can apply for worrying, for angry, for anxiety, for everything. And that helps a lot, because then we think that, fighting doesn't really help, no? It doesn't help. And getting angry doesn't help. So therefore, when you see that it is not useful, it's not good to beat somebody or to be beaten by somebody. It's not very nice. And then, you kind of see the uselessness of that. And also when you get angry, you create lots of problems. Lots of problems for yourself, lots of problems for others, for your family, for your parents, for everybody. And then it's not good. So I think if somehow some kind of those understanding can happen to your child, I think that would help. But the question is, who will bail the cat? Who will tell him? Who can make him understand that? Yeah. So that's a challenge. That you don't know. If somehow, that understanding can happen, I think then it will be useful.
Mogoče prav, da on mislil, da ni bil tak, ker bil majhen v njegovih najstniških letih. Prav, da dan današnji so teenageri res težki, najstniki so res težki. In težko se z njimi ukvarjati. Rinpoče prav, da je on bil najhujši, ker je bil star tam od 5.6. do približno 11. leta. In da je bil zelo jezen, da se je hotel z vsakim steps, da je bil zmeri v modricah. In velikrat se je moral tepsti s fanti, ki so bili večji od njega, in pol je imel en sistem, da je šel malo stran in zalaufil z vso hitrostjo in ga z glavo nabil v trebuh. In potem, ko je on padel po tleh, ga je začel udarjati s pestmi in brcati s koleni, in če še to ni bilo dovolj, ga je pa še začel grist. In pravi, in tako se pač tepe, in včasih je bil tudi on tepen, in se mu zdi, da je bilo to kar dobro za njega, da je bil včasih tepen. In potem, ko je bil star okoli 12 let, in ker pač se učil budizem, in je študiral en tekst Bodhičarja Avatara, in v tem tekstu je eno celo poglavje posvečeno samo potrpežljivosti. In pravi Rinpoče, da je imel res zelo, zelo dober učitelj, velikega mojstra. In ta mojster mu je pomagal, da je nekaj razumel. In zaradi tega se mu zdi, da mu je potem to razumevanje je bilo zelo koristno za njega. Dojel je eno stvar, da če neke stvari ne moreš spremeniti, potem nima smisla se jeziti. In če neko stvar lahko spremeniš, potem ni nobene potrebe, da bi se jezil. In zdaj namest jeze lahko tukaj uporabljamo karkoli, skrbi, tesnobo, za vse to velja, da pač, če ne moremo spremeniti, nima smisla ustrajati v takem stanju. In če lahko spremenimo, ni nobene potrebe, da bi razmišljali na tak način. In to lahko zelo pomaga, razumeti, da pretep ali pa konflikt ni dober za nikogar, da ne pomaga, da jeza ne pomaga. In ko enkrat ugotoviš, da je to popolnoma neuporabno, nekoristno, potem vidiš, da je boljš, da ne počneš tega, ne? Ker kakorkoli že se predajaš, tem je zmer posledica to, ali se ti tepeš, ali si pa tepen, kar je tudi neprijetna izkušnja samo po sebi. In ko vidiš, da je vse to brez veze in nesmiselno, potem vidiš, da svojo jezo ustvarjaš samo težave. Ustvarjaš težave sebi, ustvarjaš težave svojim staršem, ustvarjaš težave svoji družini. In če bi nekako lahko ta otrok to razumel, potem bi to verjetno pomagalo. Zdaj, drugo vprašanje pa, kdo je tista oseba, ki bi mu lahko to pomagala razumeti. In to je izziv. Ne? Ampak če bi to dojel, potem bi to verjetno pomagalo.
I'm interested in meetings with Western scientists about quantum physics. What is it so good for Tibetan Buddhists that like to find on the way of thinking of Western scientists in quantum physics, and what is of such a great interest in Western scientists in Buddhism, so that they are interested in this area?
Want to ask the question?
I can consider.
You want?
It's okay. Okay. No.
What? You can.
A boš ti prevedel?
Zanima me naslednje. Tibetanski budisti in zapadni znanstveniki, kvantni fiziki, se redno srečujejo na izmenjavah mnenj. In zanima me to, kaj je tisto dobro in tisto zanimivo za tibetanske budiste na področju kvantne fizike in kaj je za zapadne znanstvenike, ki se ukvarjajo s kvantno fiziko, da jim je zanimivega in dobrega v budizmu. Kje je tisti skupni interes?
I think it is like this, you know. From the Buddhist point of view, you know, the real, what can you say, the real search or the real, you know, the study is to try to see the reality, to try to find the true nature of things. And it is not that this is very important. Many people see it like this, that if you are a religion, then you have a set belief system, and whatever anybody says, whatever is proved right or wrong, you cannot change that. It is that. That's your belief system. You cannot change it. Buddhism is not like that. It's not. It's. If you are a sincere Buddhist, you need to start to find what is the true nature of things. Each and everybody. That's why Buddha said, don't just accept that I said it. You try to examine things as goldsmith tests the gold by rubbing, by cutting, by melting. Don't accept things because it is said in the book, because it is said by somebody you trust, and all things like that. So therefore, the science is also doing the same, trying to find the truth and trying to find the reality in a more systematic way. In Buddhism, the main tool was logic, was reasoning, and things like that. It's nothing more than that. There was no instruments or anything like that. But science is more equipped to look at things in a more direct way, systematic. So therefore, I think it's kind of very interesting for Buddhists to try to learn science, although we don't have that tradition, so it's not easy to learn. So His Holiness Dalai Lama was very much interested in science, and many of the things that they are starting to find out about physics, like about different things, is very much, what can you say, very much already mentioned in Buddhist philosophy, but it is demonstrated much more clearly and much more strongly. So therefore, it becomes much easier and clearer to understand Buddhism if you understand or if you explain it through this scientific means. I think that's how it started. And also I think the scientists, also find that kind of Buddhism as one's kind of a spiritual tradition or a spiritual power, which has that capacity to try to, what can you say, abandon their old, kind of way of thinking, if need be, and can look afresh to the, understanding and the reality. And also there are lots of, like the Buddhism has a long living tradition of not only philosophy and this research, but also experience, experientially through meditation and things like that, especially about the mind and about experience and things like that, which science was not interested so far too much. So therefore, I think although this dialogue between Buddhism and science, with His Holiness Dalai Lama initiated, he is not interested to make any conclusion. He very clearly expresses that he is not interested to kind of make a conclusion of anything, that this is what science find out is similar to Buddhism or not, or things like that, or this Buddhist idea is similar. He's not interested in that. He is interested to go on dialogue, to go on investigating, to go on, studying together, and use the scientific methods by Buddhists, use understanding and experience of Buddhists by scientists also, and things like that. It is the dialogue to go on. That's the, so that there is a better understanding of the way the things are, or the phenomena is. Not only maybe necessarily from only Buddhists and scientists, but from all living traditions of the world. To try to. That's, I think, the interest that is actually expressed desire of His Holiness Dalai Lama and many scientists also. Of course, so far, only very little, they cannot, the dialogue is very limited. Mainly it's about neuroscience and Buddhism so far. But there's lots of scope for physics, for biology, for many other subjects of the science and Buddhism as well, and many other things also, I think.
Zdaj, z stališča budizma je, kaj je resničen, tisto, kar iščemo, kaj je namen študija, je, ali pa tega iskanja, da vidimo resničnost takšno, kakršna je, da vidimo resnično naravo stvari. In zdaj, to je zelo pomembno je razumeti to, da mnogo ljudi ima predstava, pa gledam na tak način, da če obstaja neka religija, potem gre to za nek sistem verovanja, ki je zapisan in se ne more spreminjati. Se pravi, ne glede na to, kaj ugotovi, kdorkoli okoli mene, se zdržim tega zapisanega in nespremenljivega nabora verovanja. Budizem pa ni tak. Budizem ni tak. Vsak iskren budist, pravzaprav vsak bi moral pri sebi najti odgovor na to, kakšna je resnična narava vseh stvari, bi moral to raziskovati. Tudi sam Buda je rekel, ne morate kar sprejeti mojih besed, to, kar govorim, in je dal to primerjal, da kot zlatar, ki dobi neko zlato in potem preverja, je to res zlato, a ima res te kvalitete in potem počne vse sote z njim, ga tolče, ga da v ogenj in potem preverja, ali gre tukaj za neko stvar, ki je nekaj vredna ali nek ponaredek. Buda je rekel, pogledajte sami, ne verjemite zato, ker sem jaz rekel, ne verjemite zato, ker v knjigah piše, ne verjemite zato, ker vsi tako govorijo. In zdaj, znanost ima podobno motivacijo, znanost hoče najti resnico, hoče spoznati, kakšna je resnica vseh stvari. Samo da je, recimo, v primerjavi s budizmom znanost počne na bolj sistematičen način. Kajti budizem, njegovo glavno orodje je bilo razmišljanje oziroma logika, sklepanje. Medtem, ko ima znanost na voljo veliko več orodij, s katerimi lahko tudi neposredno opazujejo resničnost fenomenov in lahko to počnejo na bolj sistematičen način. Zato je, seveda za budiste je to, ali pa za budizem je zanimivo, kaj znanstveniki ugotavljajo. In tudi njegova svetost Dalaj Lama, tudi njega zelo zanima v bistvu ugotovitve moderne znanosti. In res je tudi to, da kar odkriva moderna fizika, sodobna fizika je velikokrat že bilo omenjeno v budistični filozofiji, v starih tekstih. In razlika je v tem, da zdaj znanost to lahko zelo jasno pokaže s svojimi orodji in eksperimenti. In na ta način je tudi za budiste ali pa budistične učitelje veliko lažje razložiti, o čem govori budizem, ker to znanost lahko neposredno pokaže. Medtem, ko je za znanstvenike, je pa budizem tudi zelo zanimiv kot neka pot kultivacije duha, ki ima zmožnost, da kadar je potrebno, opusti nek način razmišljanja, nek vzorec razmišljanja, da spremeni paradigmo, če je potrebno, da lahko na stvari pogleda iz svežega zornega kota, najde sveže razumevanje resničnosti. Poleg tega ne samo to, ampak tudi v budizmu, to je zelo dolga in živa tradicija, neposredne izkušnje, se pravi, budizem se ukvarjal s meditacijo in ukvarjal se je s človeškim umom, opazoval in poskušal neposredno spoznati, kaj je človeški um in kakšen je človeški um. Okoli česar se znanost se do zdaj s problemom zavesti ni veliko ukvarjala. Ampak zdaj se pa začela in tudi to je neko stičišče, neka skupna točka. In zaradi tega je njegova svetost Dalaj Lama začel s tem dialogom med znanstveniki in budisti in jasno je povedal, da tukaj ne gre za to, da bi iskal nek zaključek ali pa neko ugotovitev, ali pa da bi rekli, ja, točno to, kar budizem govori, pa zdaj znanost potrjuje in tako naprej. Ampak zato, da se pogovarjajo in da najdejo nove, boljše načine razumevanja resničnosti, boljši način razumevanja tega, kako stvari zares so. In seveda ne samo, tukaj ni doprinos samo budizmu, ampak vse žive tradicije lahko prispevajo k temu. In se pravi, Dalaj Lama, želja njegove svetosti Dalaj Lame je bilo ravno to, da se stvari začnejo, da pride do dialoga in da začnemo bolje in bolje razumevati stvari. Seveda je zaenkrat ta dialog še omejen in se v glavnem je omejen na neurologijo, vendar pa zdaj tudi odkritje fizike in biologije, skratka vse skupaj se bo lahko začeli povezovati.
Yes.
Okay, one more question. If samsara is state of mind, and nirvana is state of mind, so all the consciousness or sentient beings can be either in nirvana or in samsara or some other place. Where do animals fit in here?
Animals also, either in samsara or nirvana.
Can they change?
Huh? Yes.
Their state of mind?
Yeah.
Like a dog to be a Buddhist?
Well, Buddhists not, maybe because it's a concept, but they can be, there are lots of, like if you look into the Buddha's Jataka stories, his past lives, every, like Buddha, from Buddhist point of view, it's seen like this. First, where you are, how you are, is not about what you claim to be. This Buddhist, non-Buddhist, these are not important at all. How your mind is, whether your mind is too much anger, too much, negativity, too much kind of, or more compassion, more kind, that's more important. That's more important. So therefore, the concept of a bodhisattva is somebody who is on that path to transform themselves. So Buddha's, talks lots of his former lives on his way to become a Buddha. And there, he's not, many times, most of the time actually, he's not a Buddhist. He's sometimes an animal, sometimes a human being, but not necessarily a Buddhist, things like that. And there he's kind of, what can you say? He's practicing, he's exercising his positive side, becoming more and more compassionate, more and more positive. So there, like many times, he's an animal, like he's a rabbit, and sometimes a parrot, and sometimes a deer, and all sorts of things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So therefore, then that's how then we become a society like that. So therefore, from Buddhist point of view, how to improve is not about this concept or beliefs that I believe in this, but more about how you act and how you feel, so that's the more important thing. And also, maybe this is something I need to mention from the previous question, that sometimes people think, people misunderstand that in order to purify myself from my negative karma, I need to suffer. That's wrong. That's not Buddhist way of understanding. Suffering is not necessarily the way of, kind of purification. If I suffer, maybe I kind of get rid of some of my negative karma, but I accumulate more negative karma by suffering, because the more I suffer, more I become, I become negative. I have, all negative emotions arises, when a suffering. So suffering is not necessarily the way to purify. Purify is by doing more positive things, and becoming more positive is the way of purification. So therefore, in Buddhist point of view, suffering is not necessary, it's not needed, it's not a good thing. Nobody deserves to suffer. Nobody should suffer. Suffering has no need. That's the Buddhist way of understanding. So therefore, if we can free people from suffering more, the better it is. It is for them, it is for us, for everybody. That's the general understanding from this point. Yeah?
One more little question.
Yeah?
Saško, samo malo. Bom prevedel še najprej.
Has to translate.
Vprašanje je bilo, kaj je z živalmi, ne? Ali lahko oni spremenijo svoje stanje uma, pa kako, ali lahko žival postane budist. In z stališča budizma ne gre za to, kaj trdimo ali pa kaj verjamemo, da smo budisti ali nismo budisti, ampak kaj se dogaja v našem umu. In veliko bolj pomembno je to, ali je naš um negativen ali pozitiven. In obstajajo zgodbe o Budovih prejšnjih življenjih, tako imenovane džatake. In v teh življenjih je bil Buda bodhisattva, se pravi, Buda je bil že na poti transformacije svojega uma. In te džatake zgodbe opisujejo prejšnjo Budovo življenje, kjer v večini primerov ni bil budist. Ponavadi je bil kakšna žival v večini teh zgodb. In potem je treniral vsakem življenju, poskušal postati bolj in bolj pozitiven, spremeniti svoj razvijati sočutje in tako naprej. Včasih je bil zajec, včasih je bil papagaj, včasih jelen. In tako je skozi svojo prakso spreminjal stanje svojega uma, ne pa ni pa šlo za koncept ali pa za to, v kaj verjame ali pa kaj misli, da je, ampak kako deluje, kaj čuti. In nekaj je rekel Rinpoche še, da je pozabil omeniti pri prejšnjem vprašanju, kar je zelo pomembno, in sicer nek nesporazum ali pa napačno razumevanje, da s tem, ko trpimo, prečistimo negativno karmo iz preteklosti. In to je napačno razumevanje, to je popolnoma narobe. Kajti trpljenje ne bo nujno prečistilo česarkoli. Kadar trpimo, lahko s tem naberemo še več negativne karme, ker se v nas pojavijo še bolj negativno stanje zaradi samega dejstva, da trpimo. Kako se kako prečistimo negativno karmo, je s tem, da postanemo bolj pozitivni, da počnemo bolj pozitivne stvari. Trpljenje ni dobro in nihče ne zasluži trpljenja in nihče ne bi smel trpeti. In to je budistična pot. In več ljudi, ki jim lahko pomagamo, da se osvobodijo trpljenja, bolje je. Ali pa več biti.
Yes.
Okay, little question. So if samsara and all around is based on some karmic law or something, I read somewhere in some scripts that there are people who are karma eaters.
What?
Karma eaters. Those who eat karma. So if there is a person who...
I have never...
If there is a person who can eat all the karma of all the beings, of all sentient beings, then the karma will be gone away.
Yes. I wish there was a karma eater. Samsara, from Buddhist point of view, is this negative emotions. That's the samsara. That's the samsara. And karma is also created by our own negative emotions. So therefore, if we can do away with our negative emotions, then we have eaten up. Nobody else can do it for you. That's the Buddhist way of understanding. They can help, because we can help each other anytime. We can also help each other. The great beings can help, the Buddhas can help, but they cannot take it away. Because if they can, then they should have done it a long time before. you know. So that's the idea. So, thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Okay, generalno naziranje v budizmu je to, da ne more nekdo drug prevzeti naše ali pa odstraniti naše karme. Karma ali pa samsara je tisto, kar je ustvarjeno z našimi negativnimi čustvi, in če lahko to spremenimo ali pa se tega znebimo, potem se lahko znebimo karme in trpljenja. Seveda lahko pomagamo in drugmu, vendar in Bude in druga velika razsvetljeni učitelji lahko pomagajo, ne morejo vzeti stran, ne morejo vzeti naše karme. Ker če bi bilo to možno, potem bi morali to narediti zdavno, ker edina njihova motivacija je popolna nesebična ljubezen in sočutje.